Welcome to A Dose of Feeling. I'm Mushka, just a real human navigating the beautiful chaos of life. This podcast is about keeping it real, sharing my highs, lows, and the lessons that shaped me. It's a mix of stories, inspiration, and honest conversations, like chatting with a friend who just gets it. So get comfy and let's dive into this journey together. Let's feel it all.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode. I'm Mushka, and today I want to talk about something that seems to have come up um, pretty frequently recently. And I don't know if it's one of those things that I feel like this is what happens, where things are always coming up for you, and it doesn't mean anything, and you take it in. But then sometimes you notice a trend of it happening more frequently or at least more often, and it forces you to look at it. And I have been noticing this with parts of my story, and it could be that it's because I am sharing more about myself and my life and my experiences. And I have found that sometimes people will take something I've said in my story and they will project their own assumptions onto that story. So, a big theme in my life, which I didn't think much of when I was younger, I left home, or I was sent away to a different city when I was 12 years old to go to a Jewish high school. And I didn't see my parents very often, and I had a very different life as a teenager than I would from a typical teenage upbringing. And in those moments, in those years, it was very hard, and I just thought that it wouldn't end, and I felt like a lot of neglect and lack of love, and uh, I felt different. I knew I was different. I knew that my situation was different, and it was very hard for me. But then I ignored it, I forgot about it. I moved on. I grew up, and when other parts of my life started showing themselves to me, and I had to do work on that and like heal from other things, that's when things from my childhood started showing up as well. And you would trace your story back to earlier quote unquote traumas, little T traumas, and things that may have had an impact on you. And for me, that came up a lot, being leaving home at a young age or moving away, or however you want to frame it. But for a 12-year-old to leave in her teenage years and not be with her parents, that's influential, significant, I would say. So I've done a lot of work on that, a lot of work on those years and all the feelings it brought up and the way that it impacts me or impacted me over the years. And it's a story that I don't often revisit because it no longer holds the painful significance that it used to. And instead now it's just a story. It's just a theme of my life. It just is. But what I find is that if I say this part of my story, because it's not typical, or because it's not uh, what people, I guess, assume, I guess people assume it to be something that's really hard. So they'll end up victimizing a part of you, part of me, that I've already healed from. I've already moved through, moved on from, and so I gave that example of my life, that upbringing, my teenage years, because I find people will say, "Oh my gosh, that's horrible," or "I can't believe you went through that," and I could never do that, or you must have a lot of trauma from that. And sometimes sometimes my first instinct is that I I feel like I carry something that I should feel differently about, or that isn't really my story, that it's turned into a different story. So that's what I'll be talking about today. And we all have stories, we all have themes in our life. Some are messier than others. Some people put different meaning to their mess and to their stories. And yeah, I had rough stuff in my life, and that's true, but I've done a lot of work and I've sat with all the stuff and the mess, and I rewired a lot of patterns and healed a lot of wounds, inner child, and processed. And so a lot of those stories I don't live in anymore. And it's not who I am now, and I'm not walking around as a victim of it. And with that specific part of my upbringing, it's been like met, honored, loved, and integrated. Like it's my life, it's my story. And if anything, a lot of these stories make us who we are, and they enhance our life and they propel our life in better ways. But then sometimes when I share things with someone new or someone who doesn't really know me so well, they'll go into like freeze or pity um or sadness, and they'll say something like, "Oh, you're so strong for surviving that," or for like, "Wow, that's so hard. Don't know how you did that." And I do believe that they mean well, and I do that to other people at times when I feel like there's a part of their story they bring up, and I hold space for that. Wow, I'm so sorry. That's so hard. Uh, but sometimes I can tell when people's response is their own lens of pain and it's not my current experience. And so they try to bring me into the current experience. I find that a lot of people can project their emotional framework or capacity when they bring up like the traumatized aspect to things. And it's it's okay to feel for someone else, it really is. But there's a way to filter a story without it being through your own process. And so I would say I have to start holding space for the other person's their response to my story. And if someone's not grounded, they may take that on. And like for me, I sometimes think with certain parts of my life that, oh, okay, if they're really having a hard reaction to my story. So maybe I should feel more pain, or maybe I should be more broken or more traumatized about something. Uh, and so then that their reaction becomes part of now my story and my dialogue. A big part of healing for any of us is reclaiming our story. So our past is our past, and we get to decide how it shows up. How do we let it live inside of us? My years with my a difficult teenage upbringing, or my years struggling with depression and anxiety, um, even they are part of my story, and I choose how they live inside of me. And so I used to think healing doesn't mean that it goes away. No, I never talk about it or I forget about it, but I can choose what role that pain plays. Does it define me, or does it change me? Does it make me a better person? And I've met quite a few people who live in the victimhood of their stories, where they've gone through a really challenging experience, and that is their life. Their whole life is their challenging experience, that they can't move through growth or healing because they want that challenge to be the thing that keeps them together. And it really makes a lot of sense because victimhood is necessary at first. Obviously, it's crucial to name what we went through: betrayal, neglect, abuse, suffering. We need to acknowledge it, we need to know it. It gives language to that experience. But then, if we don't shift it into healing, it becomes that identity. And people end up using that, what's happening to me instead of what's happening for me or through me. And we sit in that comfort and the familiarity of the hardship. Everything, when you're a victim, everything else is someone else's fault, or we need someone to save us, and we enjoy just being stuck. I think the fun thing about being a victim is that we get to avoid the responsibility. We get all the love and the validation. And I find that that's what people try to project on me when I share pieces of my story, and they may be projecting their victimhood onto me, assuming that I must be a victim in this. And so they give that validation and the protection. So in sharing parts of our story, we aren't ignoring what happened because, yeah, we're noticing and honoring it, but we no longer hand it over for someone else to decide what it means. And I had this happen to me just recently where I said, I responded, someone said to me, oh, wow, that's so hard. Like, you must have so much trauma from that, from leaving home at 12 years old and, that responsibility. And there was a point in my life where, yeah, that was trauma. But today, 20 years later, I don't live in a space of trauma response because of that, because I've done so much healing and I choose not to be a victim. And sometimes I don't respond, and I just breathe through it and say, okay. But a lot of the time I really try, and I did this past week where I said, I've done a lot of healing around that, and I'm actually in a really different place right now. And this brought the conversation further where this person said, oh, what did you do? How did you do that? So really in saying this is knowing that you get to own your wholeness and your narrative. And whether something still hurts or whether it's the pilot of your life, or whether it's just a chapter that meant so much to you and you closed that chapter, but you were able to take what you wanted to enhance your life. And I have so much positive feedback, and I really get so many people reaching out to me and really looking for support or acknowledging what I share and how I share it. Every now and then, there are the comments of, why do you share this? So we don't talk about problems and we don't air dirty laundry. And I find that it's important for people like that, and even for you to notice of the people in your life, where are people choosing to take their victimhood and portray it onto someone else because it feels so much safer to give it over to someone else than to feel their own pain and to do their own healing and their own work. There are a few things that I see in my stories is that you could have had pain without being in pain, and you can honor your experiences without being trapped in them. And really to notice that so I'm doing right now The Artist's Way. It's a fantastic workbook on creativity and self-expression. And one of the week's work is paying attention to people who have blocked creativity, putting down your expression of creativity. they can't hold space for you. And those are probably the people who are commenting negative things about your life or not supporting areas of your life because they haven't yet, quote unquote, seen the light, and they haven't done what they needed to do. And so it's easier for them to yuck on someone else's yum. I think that's what that verse is. And it's very easy to go with that, to take that and start feeding into that. Oh, yeah, they're right. Oh, yeah, why would I be doing this? Oh, yeah, they know better. In moments like that, when you can pay attention to other people, other people's victimhood projecting on you, or even yourself being pulled into that victimhood when it's not a big part of your story, just ask yourself, what do I get from holding onto this victim story? I have choices, I'm making choices. And I really believe strongly that that energy lives in your body. So if you play into victimhood, you start presenting victimhood. If you find yourself going to that way of thinking, try and recreate a version of your story where you're not the one who was only hurt and traumatized, also the one who rose and grew and became a better person through it. And I want to add here, this is really not to diminish trauma and hardships and challenges in our life. And I don't want people to get a sense that, oh, we have to just move on. I'm looking at, and I'm talking for myself, and I'm talking for the people who have done the work on healing their challenges and healing as much as they can through their challenges, and own their story and rise through their story. And it's more so how to show up for the people who can't see that in you. For those of you who have lived real trauma, I want you to know that it was real and it mattered and you didn't deserve it. At the same time, that you are never broken and you're not defined by the worst thing that happened to you. There's a powerful, wise, and resilient you who really can live through that. And I've heard people tell me, oh, you're healed and that you're forgetting. And it doesn't mean to pretend that it didn't matter, because whatever happened really does matter. And I can tell you now that there are parts of my inner child work that keeps resurfacing. And just being home now, I went home and I went to Australia and I visited my family, and I went to the city where I lived during my teenage years and I brought up really hard memories, and I had to go back to those places of work and healing to move through things again. And so it doesn't mean that it's gone forever. It doesn't mean that because we work through something that we're good. But I choose to continue to move forward because I know what that life looks like, and I I want to live a full life despite everything. So I leave you with a lot of love and support and honor in your story. And I want you to know that your story is your story, however you show up. And you can find that confidence to stand up for yourself and to stand up for your story. And I really believe that using your voice and owning your voice in your story is extremely powerful and healing to recreate those narratives that may have imprinted themselves with, trauma or challenges. So thank you for being here. If you like this episode or you like my podcast, I would love to hear from you. You can leave a comment or review and share it with others who you feel may benefit from it. Thank you so much for being here. Have a great day.